generate a financial return, which they then invest back into their operations. So an endowment is basically a pot of money that the university used to invest, and it's the focus of this campaign. Portfolio is basically just a description of the lot of investments that a university has. So it's kind of like a folder of all the investments that the university has. And that portfolio is made up of things like shares, bonds, and real assets. Shares are simply when an investor buys a small part of a company. When that company then makes money, the shareholders are paid out from that profit. A bond is something called a debt security. So basically an investor lends a company money, and the investor is then paid back that money in fixed periods, and at the end of it is returned the original amount. And then real assets are things like infrastructure, land, and property, so real physical things that you can own. Universities invest in all three of these. You'll most probably commonly hear them talk about shares, and that's something we'll talk about quite a lot, but they do invest in all three of these. So each investment is made and assessed for potential return and risk. Return is simply how much money you'll make on your investment, what financial return is, but you'll often not hear the financial first. And risk is simply how likely you are to lose your money. So universities will have a target return rate for their investments and also an accepted level of risk. Asset manager are external companies that basically invest on behalf of universities. So we estimate that around 50% of universities use external asset managers to manage their investments. That means making the investment decisions, about where they invest and who they invest, how they invest. And so that's what an asset manager is. And then finally, responsible investment, which is something that we'll talk about quite a lot, is basically investing with a values-driven approach. So it's not just about investing for financial return, it's also about looking for some kind of real social or environmental impact with your investment as well. And you'll hear a lot of different terms used around responsible investment. So it's very similar to ethical investment and things like that. There are some nuances, but we won't go into them now. Finally, I'll just mention pension funds. These are managed very differently by universities, but they're another core part of university investments. But because they're managed so differently, they're not the focus of this campaign. Okay, next slide, please. So where are we now with university investments? We know that over 50% of universities have divested from fossil fuels, and that's through some brilliant student campaigning over the past kind of 5 years. But universities have endowments of over £15 billion, and that's kind of a conservative estimate I made just of quickly looking over. And these are invested generally in shares that are that have little or no public good, really. So at most they're kind of avoiding harm. They're not really actively doing good, although there are some pockets of good practice. And generally universities are quite good at excluding well observed bad practices like, say, tobacco or fossil fuels. And there are some vague commitments to responsible investment. But there's definitely more we can do. And so, next slide, please. Invest for Change is a campaign which overall aim is to radically reform the way in which universities invest their endowments, leading the way towards a more resilient and sustainable economy through investments. So it's about universities really being exemplars there about how investments should be done to really change the kind of financial system towards a better economy and one that will be more sustainable. Universities are uniquely able to lead this shift as progressive institutions, as organisations which are working for their stakeholders, and their stakeholders often are students, and as we all know, a better future and a better society to graduate into is something that's at the top of the agenda for students. Next slide, please. So the campaign has three key parts to it, which you'll see in blue in this diagram here. So we know that the student movements won the argument on fossil fuels and really won the argument about directly investing in the climate crisis, but we now need universities to proactively invest and engage in solutions. So on the left of your screen, you'll see investments. This is one part of the kind of two-levered approach there of investment and engagement. And this is about a focus on what universities invest in. So we want universities to invest in environmental and social justice solutions that will directly contribute to building a better economy and society. Then on your right, you've got engagement, which is a focus on how universities invest. We're asking universities to engage with their investments, promoting better practices through forceful stewardship and in doing that, instigating wider behavioural change in the corporate sector and through their asset managers. And then at the bottom, underpinning it all, you've got the idea for universities to adopt radical responsible investment policies, covering all university investments and cementing the above two actions, so moving investments into solutions and engaging with investments. And this is a really important one because sometimes if we don't get something in policy, it lasts for as long as the individuals that were there to start doing it. But once we get it in policy, hopefully it's the way in which the university conducts that activity from then on. So as you can see from this slide, the responsible investment campaigning covers quite a lot of different areas. And this actually makes this a really unique, gives this campaign a really unique aspect to it, where you can really localize the campaign to your campuses. And so for example, for universities that maybe can't quite commit to moving investments, they could do some of the littler steps, first steps, such as incorporating the student voice into investment decisions or disclosing current activity. All of these are kind of starter steps towards doing those bigger actions. Also, universities could be asked to invest into specific local community projects. Perhaps there's something going on in the local town or city that students are really on board with, and the investments could link into that. Or perhaps a university has an investment where there is real scope to engage to affect real change. And therefore campaigns, as you can see, can be focused on different areas of this diagram that you can see in front of you. Okay, next slide, please. So we're just going to talk now quickly about investments and what the different options for universities moving their investments are, and for students and student unions calling on their universities to do this. Next slide, please. There's lots of different options for universities to practically commit to investing better. There's the obvious route following on from a big divestment from fossil fuels movement to invest in renewables. So universities have money to invest, and society really needs renewables. So universities could funnel it into this area towards a just transition to a low carbon society. There's different options within this. There's existing renewable infrastructure that universities could invest in. There's an option for universities to pool together and have a bespoke fund for renewable infrastructure. And then finally, there's options for universities to build their own renewables, maybe on campus or maybe not. And there's examples of this. For example, there's the brilliant project at SOAS, Solar SOAS, where they've built solar panels on campus. The other key aspect is impact investing. So impact investing is investing for a measurable social or environmental return alongside the financial return. So that impact that this investment has, the social and environmental impact, needs to be measurable and really you're able to see it. And so examples of this are in your local community, for example, community energy projects. So this is where communities take ownership of the energy generation in that area, and then any profits that are made are reinvested back into the community. And there's also a really interesting social angle here, where universities could invest in things like, for example, social housing development. Perhaps if the town or city they're in really needs some more affordable housing, there's an opportunity there to fulfill some civic duty. Which leads us nicely onto the next one, which is about place-based investment. So getting your university to invest in, to tackle local challenges, and really fulfill that civic duty. And then finally, there's an idea called green revolving funds, which is used quite often in the US, but not quite come over to the UK yet. It's basically where universities invest in their on-campus infrastructure to improve its sustainability. Perhaps that's energy efficiency savings, or retrofitting the buildings. And it's basically an internal investment vehicle where the money that is saved through the improvements is then put back into the investment pot. And this could also be extended out into the local community. So it's another way to link in the sustainability, but also the place-based investment. Next slide, please. So you might be thinking everything I've just mentioned is quite wide, it's quite a big deal. Universities would have to make quite a big decision to do that. But it's really not unheard of. So this is an example from the University of Northampton, working with the UK's leading social impact investor, Big Society Capital, to invest in social impact in their local area. This has also been done by the University of Edinburgh. But as you can see at the bottom there, what they do is they invest in, for the University of Nottingham, it's actually one specific project and 2 funds. But they calculate the social impact in a monetary form, so you can kind of compare it to the financial return that you would have got in other investments. For the University of Northampton here, they invested specifically in a local logistics enterprise that trains, employs and supports ex-offenders, a fund run by the Big Issue, which supports early stage social ventures through provisions of small loans and also mentoring support, and also a fund providing early stage growth capital to social enterprises in the UK. And with all these investments, there was, after some research, they projected that the total social impact was about £52 million. So this is a really good example that if you're starting to talk to your university about investments, you can show that other people are doing it. It's not as far out as it might first seem. Next slide, please. So the other part of the campaign, as we spoke about, is engagement. Universities tend to generally invest in a fairly passive manner. We want universities to proactively engage with their investments, to change wider practices, and ensure that their investments are truly in line with their values. So it's kind of a proactive thing that they need to do. It can't just be written in policy and assume it's going to happen. Next slide, please. Again, engagement, like the investment options, will depend on the context of your individual campuses. But here's some examples of engagement. So the most obvious way to engage when you're a shareholder, so that's through the shares that you might own, the proportions of the parts of companies, is through AGMs, which are annual general meetings, so yearly gatherings of stakeholders to review and vote on aspects of a company's activity that year. They vote on annual accounts, board membership, and some kind of policy type areas. Voting doesn't always change the direction of travel, but it can be an impactful tool to make your opinion known as a shareholder, and there's opportunity to collaborate with other investors. And a big splash can really be achieved there. So for example, at the most recent Barclays AGM, 11 shareholders co-filed a resolution for Barclays to have ambitious carbon targets and to take real action on the climate crisis. That didn't actually pass, but it got enough votes to require Barclays to formally respond, and it gained enough attention that Barclays were actually forced to submit a counter resolution themselves before the meeting, which did pass to be net zero by 2050. So as you can see, there's really an opportunity to make change by kind of using your power as a shareholder to be active in AGMs. The second way to engage is through direct engagement, which is what it says on the tin, basically. It's about universities directly engaging with the companies in which they invest. This is probably most likely to occur if a company has a practice which doesn't align with the university policy or values, and it can escalate into a university perhaps divesting from that investment. What's really important here is communication around why this is happening. So if a university does engage with a company and not get the desired outcome and therefore divest, there needs to be communication around why, which kind of spreads a message of what is and isn't acceptable to the university, and hopefully encouraging other investors to do the same. The third one is kind of more indirect. It's about being really clear about the values that the university holds and the way in which they will invest. Universities, as we know, often do things as a kind of pack. So, you know, if one university does something, it feels safer for others to follow suit. So there's a real opportunity here for universities to be clear about the way they invest and the values they hold and what they will and won't invest in, and for that to kind of stem wider change. And then finally, which links in with what I was just talking about, is asset managers. So we think that about 50% of universities use asset managers, and this is an area where they can really have some impact by engaging with and through the asset managers. Because asset managers are some of the biggest investors and have actually huge shares in companies, unlike universities whose shares may relatively not be as big. But asset managers really have a voice there to change corporation practices. So if, as customers, universities are asking their asset managers to do things in a particular way, it's got scope to have real change. Next slide, please. So the last part of the kind of invest for change detail is about adopting radical responsible investment policies. And this is about covering all university investments to invest alongside the university's values and really make sure that we are finding solutions to these environmental and social justice challenges. First, we're just going to pick apart the responsible investment policies term a little bit. So next slide, please. So responsible investment, this is a definition from the UN's Principles of Responsible Investment. So responsible investment is a strategy and practice to incorporate environmental, social and governance, also known as ESG, factors in investment decisions and active ownership. So that's kind of the type of investing we're trying to do. Next slide, please. And the policy part, so why is policy important? So it anchors the activity. So we all know that we might have individuals on side within the university who want to do this work, but if it's not kind of enshrined in policy, it won't continue on in the long term. It also ensures accountability and continuity. It allows students and staff, other university stakeholders to hold the university to account on commitments that they make. And it also acts as a guideline for any outsourced activity. So particularly here, if the university uses asset managers, it's a really easy way to make sure that their action is in line with the university's policy. So basically, a good policy is the foundations of good practice. Next slide, please. So what makes a good policy? Lots of different things. There's definitely good pockets of good practice around current university responsible investment or ethical policies. investment policies that are here in this, and we will be publishing resources around what makes a good policy, using examples from current policies. But basically, this is a quick rundown of what should be included in a good responsible investment policy. So you need a clear commitment to responsible investment. You want the universities to talk about what they won't invest in, so that's exclusions. This is often in the form of kind of tobacco or fossil fuels or sales of arms. But we want to also include things like exploitation of workers, failure to recognise Indigenous land and rights, and practices that incite discrimination and hate, which are currently less common. Positive investing is about the university really being explicit, not only about what they won't invest in, but what they will invest in, and what impact that will have. So ideally here, this is about the university carving out something like 10% of their investment portfolio to invest particularly in impact investing with a specific social or environmental return. Investment strategy is about how responsible investment values are integrated into investment decisions, and how the university commit to forceful stewardship and active ownership. So that's the engagement part. That's about making sure that they're engaging with their investments and instigating wider behavioural change. Engagement, as we've spoken about, but here particularly in policy, is about having time-bound plans for escalation. It's also about making sure that the engagement you're doing isn't only stopping harmful practices, but it's actively promoting better practices. Asset managers covers making sure that the appointment and activity of asset managers is transparent and is in line with the values of the policy. And then finally, transparency is about making sure that there's regular reporting of investments, voting and engagement. So it's not just about saying what they're invested in, it's also about how they're actively investing. And finally, stakeholder engagement is about including staff and students and the rest of the university committee, both in rest of the university community, both in developing policy, what we invest in, how we invest, and making sure there's representation at committee level of both staff and students. Next slide, please. So after that quick overview of Invest for Change and what it is about, what you might be campaigning on, just talk a little bit about how you would campaign on this. So I'm sure there's lots of experienced campaigners in here, so I won't spend too long on it. Next slide, please. But it will be important either as officers or SUs campaigning on this, or supporting students or student groups to do so. Firstly, it's about planning the campaign. So I think it's really important here to set a clear aim, and that doesn't have to be a full-blown review and development of best practice responsible investment policy. It could be smaller aims, but really setting a clear aim of what you want from the university is important. And then also making sure that perhaps within that aim there's some easier steps, as well as being kind of ambitious in your overall aim. So for example, if at your university there's not student representation on the investment or finance committees, that could be a really easy ask that helps you kind of get the door open. But there's lots of different examples of those types of things. And it's still important to be ambitious with the main aim. Then researching, looking at what's happened in your university already. So it's not only about knowing the facts about responsible investment. You really don't have to be experts on this. You don't have to know all of the financial jargon and all of that stuff. You just need to know the basics and how it manifests itself in the context of your university. So what's gone on before? Where are they at in their journey with responsible investment? What's the student opinion on it? And kind of taking all of that and working it into how you're going to campaign on this. Then it's about identifying who has the decision-making power at the university. So who are you really aiming to get on side here overall to kind of succeed in your aims. And it's also about finding allies. So that could be student groups, that could be close by universities and students at those universities. It could be local groups. It could be university staff, academics, and it could also be other university senior leaders who could kind of support you in getting to that person who has the decision-making power. So it's important to kind of map the people that you might be engaging with. And then finally, it's about strategizing. Next slide, please. And of course, everyone will have kind of a different way of going about this. I think that for Invest for Change, there's gonna be quite a lot of direct engagement with the university. It's kind of a complex issue, and it depends on the specific circumstances that the university and students at your university are in. So there's going to be, I would say, an inside-outside track approach to this campaign. Any officers who are here, you'll probably be the people leading the inside track, which is a really kind of important side of it, and to be able to support students while they're doing that as well, while they're kind of developing the campaign on the other side as well. The inside track is about who the people are, so who are you targeting, finding allies, trying to work with the university to make it into a shared goal that you're going towards, and also making sure you're being pragmatic where you can, but always kind of idealistic and ambitious in your overall aim, but kind of knowing where to work collaboratively with the university to get there in the long run. Another key thing about this is in that engagement with the university is to make sure that you yourself, or if you're supporting students to do so, are documenting the engagement with the university, so that you're keeping track of any commitments that are made and keeping momentum for engagement. The outside track is about mobilizing student and staff, but university community support. So it's about raising awareness. It can seem like an inaccessible topic, I think, at times, because there's a lot of jargon around it, and people can often make you feel like you need to know everything. But just raising awareness about the impact that having a say in the university investments could have can be really effective in making people feel like they have some power over a part of the university which seems quite alien. It's also about building and maintaining momentum. So as we know, this is the start of a campaign around better investing for universities, but as the years pass, different people will move on. And so keeping that awareness and that general talking about the issue with students will make sure there's momentum as individuals leave. The outside track will also obviously include some kind of direct action tactics such as protests or demonstrations. These can be really useful for putting pressure at key points where the conversation directly with the university is paused a little bit, but it's also really useful for, as we've talked about, helping raise awareness, just a stall on campus talking to people about the issue can really help. And yeah, I think it's really important to use this campaign as a kind of educational tool. We won't go into it in this session, but there's lots of really impactful actions that people, students and general people can take, and anyone can take around reforming the way in which our kind of financial system and economy works to be for good. So for example, where you bank and things like that, and starting this conversation about university investments can maybe open the doors to some of those conversations and help students feel like they can take tangible action in their lives after university as well. Next slide, please. So we've had a bit of a big run through of the campaign. I'm sure there was lots which would have been better to go over in more detail, but I'm also sure you've had enough of listening to me talk. So I just wanted to ask, now we're kind of at the end of the overview, how much you feel you know about it now. So I'm not expecting you to go up very high. We haven't gone through much, but kind of how much you feel you know about universities and investments on a scale of 1 to 5, and how you can change them as well. So hopefully people have got to know a little bit more. Great, some higher numbers. 4, 3, brilliant. Great. Okay, brilliant. So we have got some more knowledge out there. And just out of interest, feel free to write your answer in the chat, or anyone can speak if they want to. But do people feel like they feel they know what they can do about this more as well, that they have some way to make a difference? Yes, great. One person said yes. Oh yeah, great. Okay, brilliant. So that's kind of means that we've got somewhere with, you know, with this idea of a quite complex area, and what it can be. So someone said need more advice, and the next slide please should hopefully be about how, yeah, so this is a campaign we're running for the next 2 years, and probably further, but we'll be focusing on it on campuses. And so we'll be offering training and support on this, and my email's at the bottom there. So anyone, feel free to email me for any more advice or information on this. We're planning to launch on campuses in September. You can stay updated on our social media, on our newsletter, which you can sign up to on our website. If there are student officers or students here, we're currently looking for some student steering group members. So if that sounds interesting to you, please do pop me an email, and I will get in touch with you about it. You don't particularly need to have any expertise, but if you pop me an email, we can have a talk through it. And then we'll be releasing some resources and more information over the next few months. So if you keep an eye on our website, which is also there. And so I'm going to open the floor to any questions now. Everyone is able to speak. So if you just want to unmute yourself and ask questions, or if you would like to type your question in the chat box, I can also answer.
Hi, I'm Melody.
Hi.
I'm from Edinburgh Napier Student Association. Just wondering, the presentation you just gave us was really great. I can see it's recording, so will that be available to play later on sometime, so that we can share that with our, staff or other members to share what we are talking about and how do we want to take it further?
Yeah, the recording will be available, I think, on the SU's 20 website.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Do we need any information to access that, or is it like freely available? There will be a link and just play it?
Very shortly, it'll be uploaded through the SU20 digital website, and then in the same way as you came to join this session, it'll just be there as a link to the recording. So hopefully that answers that question. I'm Jamie, by the way. I'm helping to make sure that does happen.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I've just popped my email into the chat. So if anyone does have any questions and didn't quite get the email off the last slide, feel free to email me. So if we don't have any more questions, I'll just say thank you very much for attending, and keep an eye out for any Invest for Change stuff that will be coming up in the next few months, and I look forward to hopefully speaking to some more of you.
Thank you very much, Mel.
Thanks, bye.